The suitcase was worth more than everything Nia Johnson had ever owned combined. $847,000 in cash, stacked in neat bundles, sitting in the Nairobi landfill where she'd spent every day of her 9 years searching for plastic bottles. The man bleeding beside it was white, wearing a suit that cost more than her mother made in a year, and he was dying. Nia had 3 choices: take the money and run, leave him to die and tell no one, or save his life and lose everything. What she did next didn't just change her future. It exposed a trafficking network that had stolen $400 million from African children, brought down a billionaire, and proved that the smallest hands can hold the biggest truth. But first, she had to decide if a dying stranger's life was worth more than her family's survival. 4 hours earlier, Nia had woken up at 4:30 a.m. in the Kibra slum, the largest informal settlement in Nairobi. 2.5 million people crammed into 2.5 square kilometers. No running water. No electricity in most shacks. Raw sewage running between corrugated metal homes. Her family's shack was 8 feet by 10 feet. 1 room. Dirt floor covered with flattened cardboard. A sheet hanging from a wire divided the sleeping area from the kitchen, a single kerosene burner balanced on a crate. Nia shared a mattress with her mother, Grace, and her 2 younger brothers, Emmanuel, 6, and Joshua, 4. The mattress was foam, torn and stained, salvaged from the dump 3 years ago. When it rained, water leaked through the metal roof and pooled in the corners. They'd learned to sleep in the middle. Grace was already awake, heating water for chai. She worked as a house cleaner for 3 families in Westlands, the wealthy neighborhood 12 kilometers away. She left at 5:30 every morning, worked until 6 p.m., earned 400 shillings a day. About $3. On good days, her employers gave her leftover food to bring home. On bad days, they accused her of stealing and threatened to fire her. Rent for the shack was 2,500 shillings a month. Grace made about 10,000 shillings on a good month. That left 7,500 for everything else. Food, kerosene, charcoal, water from the communal tap, 3 shillings for 20 liters, school fees when she could afford them, clinic visits when the boys got malaria. It was never enough. That's why Nia worked. Had been working since she was 6, since her father died from cholera after drinking contaminated water from the river. Someone had to help. Someone had to make sure Emmanuel and Joshua ate. Nia's job was simple: collect recyclables from the Dandora landfill, sell them to the middlemen who paid by weight. Plastic bottles, 2 shillings per kilo. Metal cans, 5 shillings per kilo. On a good day, working from 6 a.m. to 4 p.m., she could collect 15 kilos of plastic, maybe 8 kilos of metal. That was 70 shillings. About 50 cents USD. For 10 hours in the toxic smoke of burning garbage, breathing chemicals that made her lungs hurt, competing with 3,000 other scavengers for the same bottles, she made 50 cents. Grace handed Nia a cup of chai and half a chapati. That was breakfast. Nia wrapped the other half in newspaper for lunch. Grace kissed both boys' foreheads. They'd stay with the neighbor woman, Mama Afia, until Nia got back at 4. Then Nia would watch them while Grace worked her evening job, washing dishes at a restaurant in the city center. She wouldn't get home until 10 p.m. Be careful at the dump, Grace said, the same thing she said every morning. Stay away from the trucks. Stay away from the men. The trucks, because they didn't stop when they backed up, didn't care if children were in the way. 6 kids had been killed in the past year, crushed under wheels while digging for plastic. The men, because some of them weren't there to scavenge. They were there for other reasons, looking at girls Nia's age with eyes that made her skin crawl. I'll be careful, Mama. Nia grabbed her sack, a heavy burlap bag with a strap she wore across her chest, and her stick, a metal rod for poking through trash. She wore her work clothes, shorts, a t-shirt with holes, rubber sandals that were 2 sizes too big, and a cloth tied around her nose and mouth to filter the smoke. The walk to Dandora took 45 minutes. She left at 5:15 to get there early, before the good spots were taken. Other children walked the same route. Some younger than her, 5 and 6 years old, sent by parents who had no other choice. Some older, teenagers who should have been in school but couldn't afford the fees. They walked in silence, saving their energy. Dandora Municipal Dump was 30 acres of hell. Mountains of garbage 40 feet high. Plastic bags, food waste, medical waste from hospitals, industrial chemicals, electronics leaking battery acid, rotting carcasses of animals, human waste from pit latrines, all of it piled and burning. The air was gray with smoke. The smell was something you never got used to, a combination of decay, chemicals, and burning plastic that stuck in your throat. 3,000 people worked there every day. Men, women, children. Families had territories, spots they'd claimed over years. Nia's spot was on the northeast side, near where the trucks from Westlands dumped. Wealthier neighborhoods meant better trash. More plastic bottles, more cans, sometimes electronics she could sell for parts. She arrived at 6 a.m. The sun was just rising, turning the smoke orange. Trucks were already arriving, backing up to the edge, dumping loads that scattered across the mountain. Scavengers swarmed immediately, racing to get to the fresh trash before it was picked over. Nia had learned not to rush. Rushing meant accidents. She worked methodically, poking through piles, pulling out bottles, checking for metal. By 8 a.m., she had 4 kilos of plastic. By 10, 7 kilos. Good progress. Then she saw the BMW. It was driving into the landfill, which was strange. Private cars never came here. Only trucks, only dumping companies. The BMW was black, expensive, windows tinted. It drove slowly, carefully, like it was looking for something. Or someone. Nia watched from behind a pile of garbage bags. The car stopped about 100 meters away, near the eastern edge where fewer people worked. 2 men got out. Both white, both wearing suits. One was older, maybe 50, with gray hair. The other was younger, 30s, carrying something. A suitcase. They were arguing. Nia couldn't hear the words, but she could see the tension. The younger man was angry, gesturing sharply. The older man kept his hands in his pockets, calm, unmoved. Then the older man pulled out a gun. Nia's breath stopped. She should run. Should get away. Should not be seeing this. But she couldn't move. Frozen, watch. The gunshot was muffled. Not loud like in movies. Just a pop, swallowed by the noise of the dump, the trucks, the burning garbage. The younger man fell. The older man stood over him, said something Nia couldn't hear, then shot him again. Twice in the chest. The older man picked up the suitcase, walked back to the BMW, and drove away. Slowly. Carefully. Like nothing had happened. Nia crouched behind the garbage pile, heart hammering. Around her, other scavengers kept working. No one had noticed. The gunshots had blended into the background noise of the dump. She should leave. Should pretend she hadn't seen anything. But the younger man was lying there, 100 meters away, and no one else had seen. No one else knew. What if he was still alive? Nia waited 5 minutes. The BMW didn't come back. She stood slowly, looked around. No one was paying attention to the eastern edge. She walked toward the man, trying to look casual, like she was just scavenging. Up close, it was worse. He was alive. Barely. Blood soaked his white shirt, spreading across his chest. His breathing was shallow, gasping. His eyes were open, staring at the sky. And beside him, half open, was the suitcase. Filled with money. Stacks of $100 bills. U.S. currency. More money than Nia had ever seen. More money than existed in her world. The man's eyes moved, focused on her face. He tried to speak. Blood bubbled at his lips. Please. His voice was a whisper. Help. Nia looked at the money. Looked at the man. Looked around the dump at the other scavengers, at the smoke, at the mountains of garbage that represented the only future she'd ever have. She could take the money. Leave him. Change everything. Her family would never be hungry again. Emmanuel and Joshua could go to school. They could leave Kibra, rent a real apartment, with walls and running water and electricity. All she had to do was walk away. The man grabbed her ankle. His grip was weak, trembling. Please. I have children. Nia stared at his hand on her ankle. At the gold wedding ring. At the blood between his fingers. She made her decision. Nia ran. Not away from him. Toward the road where the trucks came in, waving her arms, screaming. Help! Zada! Someone's hurt. A truck driver saw her, slowed down. Nia grabbed his arm, pulled him toward the eastern edge, babbling in Swahili. Man shot. Bleeding. Please help. The driver followed her, saw the man, saw the money, and his eyes went wide. He pulled out his phone, called the police, called an ambulance. Other scavengers started gathering, drawn by the commotion. Nia stood back, away from the crowd, away from the money, watching. The man was still staring at her. Even as people surrounded him, even as the ambulance arrived 20 minutes later, his eyes stayed on her face. Like he was memorizing it. The police came. Dandora police station, 3 officers who looked bored and annoyed. They interviewed the truck driver, took photos of the scene, counted the money in the suitcase. They didn't interview Nia. Didn't even ask her name. She was just another dumped child, invisible. The ambulance took the man away. The police took the suitcase. Nia went back to collecting bottles. By 4 p.m., she had 12 kilos of plastic and 6 kilos of metal. 54 shillings. She sold it to the middleman, took the money, and walked home. She didn't tell her mother what she'd seen. Didn't tell anyone. That night, lying on the foam mattress between her mother and brothers, Nia stared at the metal roof and thought about the suitcase full of money. About the choice she'd made. She'd saved a stranger's life and walked away from more money than she'd earned in 50 years of collecting bottles. Was that smart? Was that stupid? She didn't know. All she knew was that when she closed her eyes, she saw his face. Saw his gold wedding ring. Saw him grabbing her ankle, whispering, please. She'd made the only choice she could live with. What Nia didn't know was that the man she'd saved was named Marcus Webb. He was a British financial analyst who'd been investigating a child trafficking network operating in East Africa. The suitcase held evidence money, cash seized in a raid meant to be logged as evidence. His partner, the man who shot him, was dirty, working for the same network Marcus was trying to expose. And Marcus Webb had very good lawyers, very deep pockets, and a very long memory for faces. 2 weeks passed. Nia went to the dump every day, collected bottles, came home exhausted, helped her mother with Emmanuel and Joshua, fell asleep on the foam mattress. Nothing changed. Except Grace had noticed. You're quiet, she said one evening while they ate ugali and sukuma wiki. Something happened? Just tired, Mama. Grace studied her daughter's face. Nia was small for 9, thin like all Kibber children, but she had her father's eyes. Serious eyes. Old eyes. You work too hard, Grace said quietly. You should be in school. School costs money. I know, but... Grace trailed off. They'd had this conversation before. It always ended the same way. With silence and the understanding that wanting something didn't make it possible. That night, there was a knock on their door. A real knock, firm and official. Grace opened the door slowly, cautiously. 2 men stood outside. One was Kenyan, wearing a police uniform. The other was white, wearing an expensive suit despite the heat, and leaning on a cane. Marcus Webb. He looked different than he had in the dump. Healthier. No blood. But Nia recognized him immediately. Their eyes met. Marcus smiled. Mrs. Johnson? He said to Grace in accented Swahili. My name is Marcus Webb. I'm looking for your daughter. Grace's face went tight with fear. She stepped in front of Nia protectively. Why? Because she saved my life. Grace looked at Nia, confused. Nia had frozen, unable to speak. Marcus continued. 2 weeks ago, I was shot at Dandora landfill and left to die. Your daughter found me, called for help, stayed until the ambulance came. The doctors said if she'd been 10 minutes later, I would have died. The police officer nodded. We've been trying to identify the child who reported the incident. Finally traced her through the truck driver's description. Marcus looked at Nia directly. May I speak with you? Both of you. Just for a few minutes. Grace didn't want to let them in, but you didn't say no to men like this. Men with police escorts and expensive suits. She stepped aside. The 2 men had to duck to enter the shack. Marcus looked around at the dirt floor, the cardboard, the single kerosene burner. Something changed in his expression. He sat on the floor, gesturing for them to do the same. His movements were careful, still healing. "I need to thank you properly," Marcus said to Nia. "What you did, most adults wouldn't have done." Nia found her voice. "I just called for help." "You did more than that. You saw the money in the suitcase, didn't you?" Silence. "It's okay," Marcus said gently. "I know you saw it. $847,000. And you didn't take any of it. You could have. No one would have known. But you chose to save my life instead." Grace's eyes widened. $847,000? "That's why I'm here," Marcus continued. "I want to understand why a child working in a garbage dump, a child whose family clearly needs money desperately, would choose to help a stranger instead of taking enough money to change her life forever." Nia looked at her hands. "You said you had children." Marcus went very still. "Just 2 daughters. In London." "I thought about my brothers," Nia said quietly. "If it was my mama bleeding somewhere, and someone found her, I'd want them to help. Not leave her because of money." The room was silent for a long moment. Then Marcus said, "I'm going to ask you a question, and I need you to be completely honest. Did you see the man who shot me?" Nia's heart started pounding. This was dangerous. This was the kind of thing people got killed for knowing. But she'd already made one choice in that dump. She'd chosen truth over money. She couldn't go back now. "Yes." Grace grabbed her arm. "Nia." "He was old," Nia continued. "White hair. Gray suit. He drove a black BMW. He shot you twice, took the suitcase and left." The police officer was writing rapidly. Marcus leaned forward. "Would you recognize him if you saw him again?" "Yes." Marcus looked at the police officer, then back at Nia. "That man is named Edmund Pierce. He's a senior officer with Interpol, and he's the reason I've been unable to stop a trafficking network that's taken over 2,000 children from Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania in the past 5 years." Nia felt cold. Trafficking. They take children, promise families money or education, then sell them. Labor trafficking, some worse. Marcus's voice was hard. "Edmund Pierce has been protecting them, taking bribes, making evidence disappear. I've been investigating for 18 months. That money in the suitcase was supposed to be evidence. He tried to steal it and kill me so no one would know." "Why are you telling me this?" Grace asked, her voice shaking. "Because I need a witness. Someone who saw him shoot me. Someone who can testify." "She's 9 years old," Grace said. "You can't put her in that danger." "I know it's dangerous," Marcus said. "I know what I'm asking. But without her testimony, Edmund walks free. The trafficking continues. More children disappear." He looked at Nia. "I can't force you. But I'm asking. Will you help me?" Nia thought about the children in Kibera who'd disappeared over the years. Girls mostly 10 and 11 years old, promised jobs as housegirls in Dubai or Saudi Arabia. Promised good money to send back to their families. They'd leave with strangers in nice cars and never come back. Everyone knew what really happened to them. Everyone pretended they didn't. "If I testify," Nia said slowly, "will it stop them? Will it save the children? It's the best chance we have." Nia looked at her mother. Grace's face was torn between fear and pride. "What do you think, Mama?" Grace closed her eyes. When she opened them, they were wet. "I think your father would say the same thing you're thinking. That if you can help, you should." Nia turned back to Marcus. "I'll do it." Marcus exhaled like he'd been holding his breath. "Thank you. I promise I'll keep you safe. Both of you." "How?" Grace asked. "Edmund Pierce has police protection. We live in a shack in Kibera. How do you keep us safe?" Marcus pulled an envelope from his jacket. "First, you leave tonight. I have a house in Karen, gated community, 24-hour security. You'll stay there until the trial." Grace stared at the envelope. "We can't afford." "It's free. Everything's free. Housing, food, security, education." He looked at Nia's brothers, who'd been silent throughout, hiding behind Grace. "All 3 children will be enrolled in school. You'll have a job if you want one, or you can stay home with them. Your choice." "Why?" Grace whispered. Why would you do all this? Because your daughter saved my life when she could have chosen money. And because I have 2 daughters of my own, and if they were in her position, I'd hope someone would help them. Marcus stood slowly, wincing. Pack whatever you need. We leave in an hour. Once you're safe, we'll start preparing for the trial. That night, Nia left Kibera for the first time in her life. She sat in the back of Marcus's car. Emmanuel and Joshua pressed against her, staring out the window as they drove through Nairobi. The streets got cleaner, the buildings bigger, the trees greener. Karen was a world away from Kibera. Houses with gardens and walls. Security guards at gates. The house Marcus brought them to was bigger than 10 shacks. It had bedrooms, a kitchen with a refrigerator, bathrooms with running water. Nia stood in the shower that night, watching clean water pour from the faucet, and cried for the first time since her father died. Not from sadness. From the overwhelming weight of everything changing at once. The next 3 months were a blur. Marcus's lawyers prepared Nia for testimony. They showed her photos, had her identify Edmund Pierce dozens of times. They explained what would happen in court, how the defense would try to discredit her, how important it was to stay calm and tell the truth. Grace enrolled all 3 children in a private school. Nia had never been to school before. At 9, she couldn't read or write. She sat in a classroom with 6-year-olds, learning the alphabet while her brothers thrived in their age-appropriate classes. The teachers were patient. "You're very smart," one said. "You'll catch up." Nia worked harder than anyone. Stayed up late with workbooks, asked Grace to quiz her, practiced reading signs when they went to the market. By the end of the first month, she could read simple sentences. By the end of the second, she was writing paragraphs. But the trial was coming. Marcus visited once a week, bringing updates. Edmund's lawyers are trying to get your testimony thrown out. Saying you're too young, unreliable, coerced. What does coerced mean? Forced. They're saying I'm forcing you to lie. Nia's jaw set. I'm not lying. I know. But they're going to try to make the judge think you are. The trial was set for mid-November. International Tribunal, because the trafficking network crossed borders. Judges from Kenya, Uganda, and the UK. Media from around the world. And Nia, a 9-year-old girl from Kibera, was the star witness. The week before the trial, Marcus sat Nia down. I need you to understand what you're walking into. Edmund Pierce's lawyers are very good. They're going to ask you questions designed to confuse you, to make you look unreliable. They're going to bring up where you're from, the fact that you work in a dump, the fact that you can't read well. Why does that matter? It doesn't. But they'll try to make it matter. They'll try to make the judges think a poor girl from Kibera isn't credible. Nia felt anger rise in her chest. So being poor means I'm a liar? No. But that's what they'll imply. Marcus leaned forward. That's why you have to be perfect. Calm, clear, confident. Don't let them rattle you. What if I mess up? Then we lose. Edmund goes free. The trafficking continues. He paused. No pressure. Nia didn't sleep the night before the trial. She lay in the real bed with the soft mattress and the clean sheets, staring at the ceiling, thinking about all the children who'd disappeared. About the choice she'd made in the dump. About the choice she was making now. Emmanuel whispered from the bed he shared with Joshua. Are you scared? Yes. Will the bad man hurt you? I don't know. Mama said you're very brave. Nia turned to look at her little brother. I don't feel brave. Brave people never do. Emmanuel said it like he was quoting someone. Probably their mother. The courtroom was massive. Wood paneling, high ceilings, 3 judges sitting behind an elevated bench. Rows of lawyers in black robes. A gallery packed with journalists, human rights observers, and trafficking survivors. And in the defendants section, Edmund Pierce. He looked exactly like Nia remembered. Gray hair, calm expression, expensive suit. He watched her enter with cold eyes, no recognition, no fear. Nia sat at the witness table. A microphone was adjusted in front of her. Her feet didn't touch the floor. Marcus's lead attorney, a Kenyan woman named Wamboi Kimathi, stood. The prosecution calls Nia Johnson. The judges looked down at her. The lead judge, a British woman named Justice Margaret Thornton, spoke gently. Miss Johnson, do you understand why you're here? Yes, ma'am. And do you promise to tell the truth? Yes, ma'am. Then we'll begin. Wamboe walked Nia through the testimony. What she saw, when she saw it, how she identified Edmund Pierce. Nia spoke clearly, remembering everything Marcus's lawyers had taught her. Stay calm. Make eye contact. Don't guess. And you're certain the man you saw shoot Marcus Webb is the defendant, Edmund Pierce? Nia looked at Edmund. Yes. That's him. Then it was the defense's turn. Edmund's lawyer was a white South African man named Johan Pretorius. Expensive suit, cold smile. He stood and approached Nia like she was something distasteful. Miss Johnson, you testified that you saw my client shoot Marcus Webb. Is that correct? Yes. And where were you standing when this happened? Behind a pile of garbage. About 50 meters away. 50 meters. That's quite far. Are you sure you could see clearly from that distance? Yes. Through smoke and trash? In a landfill where thousands of people are working. I saw him. Pretorius smiled. Miss Johnson, can you read? Wamboe stood. Objection. Relevance. I'm establishing the witness's credibility, Your Honor. Justice Thornton frowned. I'll allow it, but get to the point quickly. Can you read, Miss Johnson? Nia's face burned. I'm learning. But at the time of the incident, you could not read. Correct. Correct. Can you write your name? Now I can. But not then. So you're uneducated. You've never been to school. You work in a garbage dump for 50 cents a day. Is that accurate? Objection. Wamboe's voice was sharp. The witness's economic status has no bearing on what she saw. It has bearing on her reliability, Pretorius shot back. Children from extreme poverty are more susceptible to suggestion, more likely to say what they think adults want to hear. Justice Thornton leaned forward. Mr. Pretorius, are you suggesting this child is lying? I'm suggesting she may be mistaken. Confused. Perhaps influenced by Mr. Webb, who has provided her family significant financial support. He turned back to Nia. Mr. Webb is paying for your housing, your school, your food. Correct. Yes. So you owe him a great debt. He doesn't owe me anything, Nia said quietly. I'm telling the truth because it's true. Not because of money. But you do understand that if my client is acquitted, Mr. Webb's generosity might end? Wamboe exploded. Your Honor, this is outrageous. The witness will answer, Justice Thornton said. Nia looked at the judge, then at Pretorius. I understand that if I lie, children keep getting stolen. That's why I'm here. Not because of a house or school. Because telling the truth matters more than being comfortable. The courtroom went silent. Pretorius's smile tightened. Very noble. But let's be honest, Miss Johnson. You saw a white man in a suit shoot another white man. In a city with thousands of white men in suits. How can you possibly be certain it was Edmund Pierce? Because I looked at his face. Because I watched him stand over Mr. Webb and shoot him twice. Because I saw his eyes when he walked back to his car. Nia's voice was steady now, the fear burning away into something harder. And because when you do something evil, people remember. I remember. Pretorius stared at her for a long moment. Then he made a mistake. You've been coached, haven't you? Mr. Webb's lawyers told you exactly what to say. No. They prepared you for weeks. Showed you photos. Rehearsed your testimony. They taught me what would happen in court. They didn't tell me what to say. I know what I saw. Do you? Pretorius leaned on the witness table. Or do you know what you've been told to believe? Nia looked him in the eye. I know that the man in the garbage dump shot someone and left him to die. I know he had gray hair and a gray suit and drove a black BMW. I know he's sitting right there. She pointed at Edmund. And I know you're trying to make me sound stupid because I'm poor and black and 9 years old. But being poor doesn't make me a liar. It just makes me someone who knows the difference between right and wrong. The gallery erupted. Reporters scribbling, observers whispering. Justice Thornton banged her gavel. Pretorius stepped back, his face red. No further questions. Nia was excused. She walked back to her seat beside Grace, her legs shaking so badly she could barely stand. Grace pulled her close, whispered, "Your father would be so proud." The trial continued for 2 more weeks. Other witnesses testified. Financial experts traced the trafficking network's money. Interpol agents who'd worked with Edmund Pierce testified about suspicious evidence disappearances. Trafficking survivors, now adults, spoke about being taken as children, promised jobs, sold. But it was Nia's testimony that the media focused on. 9-year-old faces down corruption, read the headlines. Her face was in newspapers across East Africa. Marcus visited after the testimony. "You were incredible. Did I help?" "More than you know." But Edmund's defense was strong. They argued reasonable doubt, lack of physical evidence, unreliable witness identification. They painted Marcus as a vigilante pursuing a vendetta. They suggested Nia had been manipulated. The judges deliberated for 6 days. On November 28th, they delivered their verdict. Guilty. Edmund Pierce was convicted of attempted murder, evidence tampering, and complicity in human trafficking. Sentenced to 25 years in prison. No parole. The courtroom erupted. Journalists rushed for exits. Trafficking survivors were crying. Marcus sat with his head in his hands. And Nia, sitting beside her mother, felt something she hadn't felt in years. 3 months after the verdict, Marcus sat with Nia's family in the living room of the house in Karen. It had become their home, but they still waited for the other shoe to drop. For Marcus to say the arrangement was temporary. Instead, he said, "I'm going back to London next week. My family needs me. But before I go, I need to discuss something with you." Grace tensed. "Here it comes." Marcus pulled out a folder. "This house is yours. I've transferred the deed to your name. No rent, no mortgage. You own it." Grace stared. "What?" "I've also established a trust fund for all 3 children. Managed by a board that includes Wambui Kimathi and 2 other attorneys. It will cover all educational expenses through university, including living costs if they choose to study abroad." He turned to Nia. "There's an additional scholarship fund in your name. The Nia Johnson Scholarship for Kibera Children. It will send 50 children to school every year, prioritizing girls who work to support their families." Nia couldn't speak. "Why?" Grace whispered. "This is too much. We can't accept." "You can and you will," Marcus said firmly. "Your daughter made a choice in that dump. She chose integrity over wealth, a stranger's life over her family's immediate needs. That choice saved my life. It led to Edmund's arrest. It shut down a trafficking network that had taken over 2,000 children." He paused. "Do you know what happened to that network's victims after the trial?" Grace shook her head. 427 children were recovered, returned to their families. Another 680 were identified as still missing, and now we have resources to find them because Edmund flipped. He's testifying against the entire network in exchange for a reduced sentence. Marcus looked at Nia. All of that started because a 9-year-old girl decided that doing the right thing mattered more than money. "I'm not giving you charity. I'm giving you what you've earned." Nia finally found her voice. "I just called for help. You did more than that. You believed a stranger's life had value. In a world that had given you every reason to be selfish, you chose kindness." Marcus smiled. "That's not common. That's extraordinary." He stood to leave, shook Grace's hand, then knelt in front of Nia. "I'll be in touch. And when you're older, if you want to work in advocacy, human rights, journalism, whatever calls to you, call me. You've got something most adults never develop, moral courage." After he left, Grace sat on the couch, staring at the deed to the house, the trust fund papers, the scholarship agreement. "Is this real?" she whispered. Nia looked around at the clean walls, the furniture, the kitchen where her brothers were eating dinner. At the school uniforms hanging in the closet. At the books on the shelf that she could almost read now. "I think so, Mama." "What do we do?" Nia thought about the question. About the children still in Kibera, collecting bottles in Dandora, breathing toxic smoke, earning 50 cents a day. "We help," she said simply. Like someone helped us. 5 years later, Nia Johnson stood at a podium in the University of Nairobi auditorium. She was 14 now, taller, confident, wearing her school uniform from one of the best private schools in Kenya. She'd skipped 2 grades, tested at the top of her class, won national mathematics and debate competitions. The auditorium held 500 people. Students, faculty, journalists. She was giving a speech for Human Rights Day. When I was 9 years old, Nia began, I made a choice in a garbage dump that changed my life. But it didn't just change my life. It changed how I understood value. She clicked to the first slide. A photo of Dandora landfill. This is where I worked from age 6 to 9. 10 hours a day, earning 50 cents for 15 kilos of plastic bottles. The same day I found Marcus Webb bleeding in the trash, I found a suitcase with $847,000. I had 3 choices: take the money and run, leave him to die, or save his life and lose everything. Second slide. The courtroom. I chose to save him. Not because I was noble or special. Because when I looked at him, I didn't see money or opportunity. I saw my mother. I saw what I'd want someone to do if it was my family bleeding somewhere. Third slide. Group photo of scholarship recipients. The Nia Johnson Scholarship has now sent 312 children to school. 68% are girls. 40 have graduated secondary school. 8 are in university. They're studying medicine, engineering, law, education. She paused, looked at the audience. But here's what I want you to understand. The scholarship isn't named after me because I'm special. It's named after me because I was ordinary. I was a child collecting trash, surviving day to day. And if I could make a choice that mattered, anyone can. Fourth slide. Statistics on trafficking. Since Edmund Pierce's arrest and testimony, 1,247 children have been recovered from trafficking networks. Not all of them alive. But 1,247 families have answers. Justice. Closure. Her voice hardened. And it started because one person with no power, no money, no voice, decided that truth mattered more than comfort. She clicked to the final slide. A quote. Small things aren't small. One sandwich, one phone call, one moment of courage, it ripples. You never see where the ripples end. Nia looked out at the audience. I'm not here to tell you that doing the right thing always works out. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes you save someone's life and they still die. Sometimes you testify and the guilty go free. Sometimes you sacrifice everything and get nothing back. She paused. But sometimes, you make a choice that seems small. You help one person. You tell one truth. And 5 years later, 312 children are in school. 1,247 families have their children back. And a trafficking network that stole thousands of lives is destroyed. Her voice dropped. The question isn't whether your choice will change the world. The question is whether you'll make it anyway. The auditorium was silent. Then someone started clapping. Slow at first, then building. Within seconds, 500 people were on their feet. Nia stood at the podium, 14 years old, looking at the faces looking back at her. Some were crying. Some were nodding. Some were young, her age, sitting in that audience wondering if they had the courage to do the hard thing. She hoped they did. Because the world didn't need more people who stayed quiet to stay safe. It needed more people who understood that small hands can hold big truth. That night, Nia sat on the porch of the house in Karen with her mother. Emmanuel and Joshua were inside, doing homework. Grace was drinking tea, peaceful in a way she'd never been in Kibra. Your father would be proud, Grace said quietly. You always say that. Because it's always true. Grace looked at her daughter. You know what I think about? That morning when you left for Dandora, I said the same thing I always said. Be careful. Stay away from the trucks. Stay away from the men. And you came home that day having seen a murder, saved a life, and walked away from more money than I'll see in my lifetime. She laughed, a little bitter. I thought I was protecting you. Turns out you were protecting everyone. I was scared, Mama. I know. Brave people always are. They sat in comfortable silence. Then Nia said, Marcus called. He wants me to speak at an Interpol conference in Lyon next year. About child trafficking prevention. Will you go? I think so. If you come with me. To France. Grace's eyes widened. I've never been on a plane. Neither had I until Marcus flew us to court. Nia smiled. We'll figure it out together. Grace reached for her daughter's hand. How did I raise someone so brave? You taught me that people matter more than things. That doing the right thing is more important than doing the easy thing. Nia squeezed her mother's hand. I learned that from watching you work 3 jobs so we could eat. From watching you give away food when we barely had enough. You've been making the hard choice your whole life, Mama. I just followed your example. Grace's eyes filled with tears. I love you, baby. I love you too. Inside the house, Emmanuel called out. Nia, can you help with my math homework? Nia stood, kissed her mother's forehead, and went inside. Tomorrow, she'd go to school. She'd study calculus and literature. She'd meet with the scholarship board to review applications. She'd write a speech for the Interpol conference. But tonight, she was just a 14-year-old helping her little brother with math problems. Some things were that simple. The ripples. The Nia Johnson Scholarship Fund served 312 children in its first 5 years. By year 10, that number reached 847. The fund expanded beyond Nairobi to Uganda, Tanzania, Rwanda. Children who'd been collecting trash, working in quarries, selling vegetables on roadsides, all got the chance to go to school. 68 became teachers. 34 became nurses and doctors. 12 became lawyers. 6 became social workers. 23 started businesses. 142 were still in school, still working toward their futures. And every single one of them was taught the same thing Nia had learned in that garbage dump. Small things aren't small. Marcus Webb returned to Kenya twice a year, visiting the scholarship recipients, speaking at schools, funding new programs. He never forgot the 9-year-old who'd saved his life. He'd tell anyone who listened, I've met presidents and billionaires and Nobel Prize winners. None of them had the moral clarity of a child who chose kindness over cash. Edmund Pierce died in prison in year 6 of his sentence. Heart attack. No one mourned. Grace Johnson never worked as a house cleaner again. She became a program coordinator for the scholarship fund, interviewing families, understanding their needs, ensuring the help was real and not just paperwork. She met hundreds of mothers like herself, exhausted, desperate, fierce in their love for their children. She helped them the way Marcus had helped her. Emmanuel and Joshua both graduated university. Emmanuel became a civil engineer, Joshua a pediatrician. They returned to Kenya after studying abroad, committed to building the country that had raised them. And Nia Johnson? She graduated university at 18 with degrees in international law and human rights. She declined job offers from the UN, from major NGOs, from Marcus's firm in London. Instead, she went back to Kibra. Not to live, but to work. She opened a legal aid clinic 3 blocks from where her old shack had stood. Free services for families facing eviction, employment disputes, police harassment. She took the hard cases. The ones no one else wanted. The ones that didn't pay. Because she'd learned something in that garbage dump that stayed with her forever. The most important choices are the ones no one's watching you make. To the person watching this, Nia Johnson's story started with a choice. Save a stranger or take the money. Help someone who couldn't help her back. You're going to face that choice. Maybe not with a suitcase full of cash. Maybe not in a garbage dump. But you'll face it. Someone will need help when it's inconvenient. Truth will be dangerous. Doing the right thing will cost you something. What will you choose? Will you be the person who looks away? Who takes what they can get? Who stays silent to stay safe? Or will you be the person who understands that small hands can hold big truth? That one phone call can save a life. That one moment of courage can destroy a trafficking network. That one choice can ripple into hundreds of changed lives. The world doesn't need more rich people or famous people or powerful people. It needs more people like Nia Johnson. More people who understand that character isn't measured in what you do when everyone's watching. It's measured in what you do when no one is. Drop a comment. Have you ever chosen to help someone when it cost you something? What happened? Share this story if you believe small choices can change everything. Subscribe if you want more stories about ordinary people doing extraordinary things. At Black Voices Uncut, we don't polish away the pain or water down the message. We tell it like it is because the truth deserves nothing less. Your choice matters. Make it count.